Awesome. Yes. Valentine. So Valentine Village. So it's good.
Like a newer,
Sorry.
like a newer kind of like a building, looks like a new build out or.
So it
As
was.
a reminder,
It was a space
everyone, our
that was
meeting's
never
live
built.
streaming now.
Really? I know, we were just commenting on that.
I've got my watch tonight. I can't find my phone, but he wants to sit beside you.
Hey, folks, just as a reminder, we are live streaming now, okay?
I need to give you a little room since you're wearing a mask still.
Get rid of one of those chairs.
Well,
How you doing?
I had this before, when I was at the beach, and I got tested on the ear.
Okay, I did.
You mind, I was fine. Will you, call the roll? Sure. So I won't have to talk on phone. I have bronchitis, so.
Oh.
Well, let me know.
Take a walk.
Sit at this table. Absolutely.
Being 6 o'clock, I call the downtown planning steering committee meeting to order. I ask Vice Chairman Lee to call the roll.
Roll call. Nate Bowman. Here. Gateway Campbell.
Here.
Doug Ferguson.
Here.
Sean Flynn.
Here.
John Foster. Don Guest. Charles Ginyard.
Here.
Lee Holman here. Janelle Harris. Elaine Kearns.
Here.
Bob Lemon.
Here.
Sarah McCauley.
Here.
Elizabeth Rodriguez. Cindy.
Here.
And Jessica.
Here.
Anybody on the phone?
Mike Russell and April Dunn confirmed on the phone.
Okay.
Have that for Diane.
And ex officiato, Barbara Gephardt, Kathy Jones,
Here.
John McClellan,
Here.
Diane McLean, John O'Neill.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Diane confirmed she was on the phone.
Ah, okay. All right. That's fine. It's been called.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, so you have the agenda before you. The same that had been, we would have tried to do on April the 28th. This is May the 5th. Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Then we have the minutes from March the 17th.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented for March 17th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? The next item is number 6.
Madam Chair, this is a little bit unusual, but if you don't mind, can we give Tracy just a minute to talk about the volunteer effort that took place?
Absolutely. Tracy?
Thank you. So we had our first public engagement at the Hello Huntersville event on Sunday, May 1st, and we wanted to thank the volunteers who came out, along with all the elected officials and the many members that came by and stopped by. We had a wonderful, successful turnout. We were able to share flyers with quite a few in the public, and the map was a great point of conversation. And you've all received an email with the additional volunteer opportunities that are coming up. Our next one is this Saturday. So we hope to continue to spread the word and let the public know about what's going on with Downtown Plan and to come out for our next public forum.
Anyone wish to comment or? Next item is item number 6, summary draft public forum, public input. Sure.
Members, it's an honor to be here with you this evening, and I appreciate everybody's flexibility to rejoin here on the 5th of May. Just want to remind everybody we are in phase 2 of our master planning process. The last meeting together, we talked about organizing principles. And this evening, we're going to talk about the draft alternative futures.
Excuse me, Larry.
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
pull the microphone towards you? Thank you.
And just a quick snapshot of the project schedule, to let you know where we are. This is meeting number 7. And looking ahead, we have public forum number 2 next Thursday evening. And as we prepare for that, we've shared with you before, we're excited to have this in-person meeting next Thursday evening at Huntersville Presbyterian Church. And what you see is a space plan that we've put together that begins to demonstrate how we think this will be organized, and as we talk through these organizing principles and alternative futures. So what you see is a layout of seating that's on the north side, the top side of the page, and then on the bottom part you see alternative future 1, 2, and 3 stations. So our approach to this is we're going to open up with about 30 minutes. We're going to give ourselves introduction to the group and talk about the organizing principles 1 through 6. Those are important elements to our planning process. As you know, we had a great discussion during our last meeting together, and we want to share and reiterate those core principles as we talk about the alternative futures, which will then roll into that. So the idea is in this first 30 minutes is we're going to give a slideshow presentation to the audience sitting in the chairs. Then we're going to break out for 60 minutes at these tables. And we're going to have the opportunity to talk about each one of these alternative futures individually with citizens who join. Again, it's the opportunity to have some direct feedback and talk about any questions or issues that they might see with any of these alternative futures. And we're going to help them understand the approaches to the organizing principles with each one of these alternative futures. So there's a clear understanding of what it might mean if we were to take this future, this path, and this other path. After that opportunity, and this will be an exchange of thoughts and ideas, we'll have the opportunity to record any feedback we have with any notepads or anything of that nature as we have that exchange. After that, we're going to have a public feedback interactive session. So the idea is that we would say, okay, let's all go back, let's reconvene, and we'll set up at the lectern there and have the opportunity to review each one of these alternative futures that we've looked at together and evaluate each one based upon these organizing principles and see which one the audience and the citizens feel best represent that approach. And interactive, what we mean by that is we're going to have these handheld clickers where people can make anonymous, selections based upon what they're seeing on the screen there. So, for instance, with alternative future or with organizing principles 1, we're going to share drawings that represent each one of these alternative futures, have some dialogue, and then allow them to make a selection. And we'll get some real-time feedback in terms of how the audience is leaning on terms of each one of these organizing principles. We're going to have a discussion about that. So as we go through that, we'll again have a real-time understanding of the audience, the citizen feedback on these principles. And the idea is that we would sort of use this information to help establish what that ultimate alternative future is going to be. We'll talk about this in a moment. We have 3 defined, but we understand that ultimately the master plan will evolve out of sort of a collection of different components with each one of these alternative futures. So the idea is that after this meeting, this public forum, we'll have the opportunity to go back, synthesize into the final alternative futures, and present back to you during the next steering committee meeting. That, in effect, will be the vehicle that we spring forward our master plan. The other thing I should mention, we're going to have a number of hard copy printouts here at each one of these alternative future stations. Those hard copies are going to be pinned up here in this room, similar to our discovery process, along with the results of that public forum, so that folks who could not join that evening can come here into the space and see what those results were. They could see the presentation, and they can leave behind feedback as to whether they agree or disagree with some of the feedback that was presented during that meeting. I'll pause there and ask if there's any questions. Yes.
So I looked at some of the alternative futures that were posted online, and has any, I guess, engineering or cost research gone into those, or are they in a vacuum? And I asked that because, I'm not an engineer, but I was looking at one where there was a proposed roundabout on Sherwood that was going to connect a new east-west from behind the food line all the way over to 115. And I believe there's a creek and some pretty crazy topography there.
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering, it'd be nice to connect a line on a map, but does it factor in that might be cost prohibitive?
Respond to the engineering. The engineering that's taking place right now, we have with our team, Gannett Fleming, they're looking at a traffic analysis right now. So they're looking at a level of service based upon what's in place now. They've actually gone out and collected real-time information in terms of traffic counts here in and around these key intersections around downtown Huntersville. They are using just basic diagrams as we presented here to look at those opportunities to alleviate any pressures on Gilead Road and other streets in and around the downtown. In terms of costing, we haven't gotten to that level of engineering. That's something to be determined. But one thing I will tell you is that we looked at the earlier downtown plans in terms of the regulating plan, some of the street network connections, and we began to make some inferences based upon topography, as you mentioned, some of the creekways you might see as you get into the plans as well. We took an opportunity to bend some streets to respect the existing topography, but in terms of the costing and some of the other issues related to that, that's something that will be further down the road outside of this master planning process. But as we look at these alternative futures, it begins to inform us in terms of which one of these should be prioritized in terms of looking for capital improvements down the road. We'll look at, this is more tactical information, what are those funding mechanisms? Is it something that's here locally, state, the federal level? And who are some of those other partners who should perhaps have participation in this? Given some of the infrastructure that's being planned in and around your town, ERT for one, how much should that project begin to help some of these other infrastructure decisions that you're making right now?
But one thing I might say, to your question right off the bat, as you say, and you picked up on it, certain things do cost more than others. Topography and other things, to the question that, people can look at this and say, this has got to be high, this has got to be low, and this one might be in the middle. At a planning level, those are the kinds of ways that all of us should keep in mind as we look at cost on this. As Larry said, final costing, analysis comes at a later date.
Well, and following up to that, what about economic impact? So are these plans also having some type of economic impact study as far as what's differentiated between, the different alternative features?
From a pure dollar standpoint, no, that's not within the scope of our consulting agreement. I think the main thing of all of these is to look at it from a qualitative standpoint. Does it represent the kind of town you want? Then once we start to dial in past alternative futures into a master plan, there's some, additional things that can be done to start to look at the actual cost impacts of benefit and the cost impacts versus infrastructure cost. But to do that at this stage I wouldn't even advise a municipal body to invest that kind of analysis and cost in it now. We're truly looking at planning and qualitative issues.
Let me see if I can help you out a little bit. We kind of jumped ahead. That road is on my agenda too, but right now I think the discussion is the format and the survey, and with the other 45 minutes at the end of the thing is when we get into the weeds on all these plans.
Yeah,
So right now
that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so trying to And on that topic, so the breakout tables, what do you foresee is going to be table 1, 2, 3 exhibit? Is it going to be the actual pages of the alternate futures?
Yes.
The 8 pages that you showed us in each of
Yes,
those things?
so you saw
Okay.
that there was layers that kind of built up. based
Right,
on
right.
organizing. This was mobility, there's
Yeah.
living, there's gathering. So we'll have all those out there so we can talk to citizens,
Right.
what each one means, and help them understand where those principles are embedded within these alternative
Okay.
features.
You're going to be helping us understand those ourselves here in a little bit, hopefully. 'cause,
Yeah, and we'll be,
the bill that we ended up with
and
quite
clearly, this is a dialogue, and we understand more with each conversation with a group such as this gathered, or citizens who choose to come to this. We all learn what good questions are asked, hopefully good information is received, but at some point, everything hopefully comes together so that a good strategic plan can be crafted for your downtown. It's that simple.
What can we do to make sure we fill all 50 seats? I mean, we had a lot of response at the Hello Huntersville last weekend, but I'm worried it's going to be just us.
We need the committee's help. I mean, that was part of the community engagement
right.
How do we get it
request.
diverse, right? Like, we don't want it to be all the same type of people, like everybody from Vermillion coming here, kind of want a wide scope, right? I mean, what's your recommendation on that? How do we get to have a, because this is basically a focus group, correct?
Not necessarily. Tracy, can you describe some of the media blasts that have been going out?
Sure, so we do, obviously, anybody who signed up for the email blast, but that extends to anybody who has pretty much ever signed up their email list, for any email list for the town. We consider this a top priority, so whatever subject you selected on this particular case, you at some point in time get an email letting you know about the public forum. And then we have the social media that goes out across the town's Facebook account, Twitter account, Nextdoor account, on a repetitive basis with varying messages in order to draw and attract people on that, as well as the public engagement pieces.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I want to back up and get in the weeds for 10 seconds. Since my flip phone has not read any of this stuff yet, where, pray tell, after living on Sherwood Drive for 41 years and 7 months, are they talking about putting a roundabout?
Through the park. Through the park. Between Paul and the park.
Right there at the greenways.
Your front yard.
Janelle?
Some of those cards that have the QR code on it and pass them all around between all of us and we can, get them to our stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We can make those, I don't have them available this evening, but we can definitely get those for everyone and make them available if you want to come pick them up. And then there's a bowl at the front. The town had printed some stickers and some static clings for visibility and awareness that we were handing out as freebies at the table. There's some there for you tonight too to take and share with others too as another way to get the word out. Yep. That's the one.
I'm going to make one more comment for now. So surely somebody has told y'all, if y'all are talking about putting a roundabout at the park, that our beloved Charlotte Mecklenburg school system is talking about building a school, a newer school, I will say second school, and I'll come back in 50 years and say I was right, just like they did at Alexander, in the lower part of the school's property. So y'all are gonna put a roundabout at their front door.
Well, we are having discussions with Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools now. We can say that about some of the
Are you
principals
getting
there.
educated answers?
It seems so, yes. I would have to say.
You got to reply.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
May I make one comment? Thank you very much, Pastor Ferguson, for the use of the church. Very nice. We appreciate it.
Well, I noticed on the map, food and beverages are allowed, so,
Okay.
no alcoholic beverages. They can be at Crafty's at 8:05.
They're all cafeteria.
Well, yeah, it makes cleanup work.
Let's shut up. They won't be up.
So again, just to remind everyone, the organizing principles, here they are all together. Again, it was a great conversation we had the other week. Just to remind everybody, the 6 principles are mobility, nature, gathering, living, civic, and soul. And each one of these principles is sort of woven into the layers that make up each one of these alternative futures. So I should also mention, we're going to have these printed out for individual discussion during the public forum as well, because they are important. This is a living document. As we learn more, hopefully a lot of them see their comments here in these key words. But again, this is something that will evolve, and you'll notice that some of the verbiage actually evolved since our last conversation together to dial it in and really capture the bodies, the community's notions about each one.
I may add one thing too. When Larry says printed out, we will have this printed out ad nauseum. This is the most important part in many ways of the things we've done. This is the pivot point. So we're not going to be operating on a scarcity model in terms of this information. I want to make sure we have multiple handouts. Anybody who wants to have it in their hand will have it in their hand and should have it in their hand. Because this is the basis in which sound planning, good conversation, discussion goes. Well, what about this? Where does it relate relative to this? Your opinion. How does it match up? So with that, let me talk about this before we get into looking at these alternative futures. Some things that I just want to make sure, kind of like a ground rules as we go and engage on this. We all need to recognize that if we stick to these organizing principles, the issues that we will have differences about are not about quality. If you go to a Starbucks, or you could go to any other place, if you don't drink coffee, it could be a soda, whether you're getting the smaller cup or the big cup, if it is Starbucks and you order a double grand no-fat latte, that's what you're getting, right? This all has quality. So we're talking about, I think, with everything we've seen and talked about this, the scale of the things we're doing. I haven't heard anyone around this table, or for that matter, really from the citizenry, not talk about on a similar level the idea that you want a community you can love, one that's safe for kids, one where the car is a gas, one where nature infuses this, and where we have a soul that's Huntersville, a place that's ours and people know it. All these things that are weaving into it, we differ on the question of basically scale. I wanted to show this photo. This is, well, you've all now heard Bob Gibbs. Bob has been here and you've heard him talk about. This is Bob Gibbs' hometown. It is a picture postcard place in many ways. It is Birmingham, Michigan, right outside, Detroit. I think it's primarily the place where General Motors execs lives, but I'm not sure on that. It may be one of the other ones who used to be called the Big Three, right? One thing, I put that red bar across of that. The place about urbanism that really matters is that first basically 15 or 20 feet. I'm telling you as a professional, whether it's people arguing about something being 5 stories or 6 stories or whether it's 3 stories, that's almost like, in my opinion, professionally, it's like discussing how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. Because the real issue is about, for all of us, is what the streets are, how it lives, how it works. The upper level gets into other issues about how lively is the place, right? The compensating balance of that, what does traffic looks like? And more lively, more people are of a balance, then the more people really can ameliorate the use of the car when you get balance in terms of living, in terms of work, in terms of play. I just want to get that out there as we talk about these things. These two, quality, not about quality, nobody needs to browbeat anybody else, nor is it, but it is about scale. And even then, we need to focus upon issues that really matter, which I will say happens at the street. The next one I will say, some things are interchangeable. You're going to see all manner of different things that come up from all 3 of these organizing principles that are grounded in the organizing principles that are coming through the alternative futures. You're going to see some things in one alternative future you like. You're going to see others you don't like. That's okay. It doesn't mean you have to accept it as a full set as an alternative future. You may say, you know what, that thing in alternative future 1, I really like that if we could apply it to alternative future number 2. Great, note that, note it on the side. This is not a fixed element here. We are working creatively and interactively with the information that we're giving to you. Next thing is, this is a book. Has anybody ever seen this book or read it in the room? I'm just curious. Let me tell you about this book. I had a friend recommend it to me. I read it and it scared me. Reason it scared me, my friend gave it to me as a playbook on how people ought to deal with people. Reason it scared me, all you have to do is read that comment on the side, is that you don't ever compromise. The guy who wrote this book was a former FBI hostage negotiator. Well, if you think about what he's saying up there, it makes sense. If you're negotiating whether somebody's going to lose their life or not, you can't cut somebody in two and compromise, and somebody gets half a human being, other body gets the other half. We're not here to negotiate about hostages. We're here to negotiate what's best in the big picture for everybody who calls Huntersville home now and who will call it home in the future. Some ways, in my profession, that's as serious as a hostage, but it's a totally different process. So we are in many ways sometimes going to be talking about splitting differences and finding that place of mutual and common ground. It's my professional opinion. It's the way I've practiced all my life in towns all over this country, and I think it applies equally to Huntersville as it does anywhere else. So I just wanted to share that. So with that, Larry, let's jump right into it. We're going to go through these. Larry, as usual, be going back and forth. He's a play-by-play. I'm the color commentator. He's the keeper of the data, and I'm the keeper of the ideas in many ways. I'll go back and forth. So,
as we get into this, again, here's the alternative futures, designations, and approaches. We've got 1, 2, and 3. We're calling low intensity, medium intensity, and high intensity. What you see here is sort of the synthesized existing conditions map of Huntersville based upon our discovery process. You see everything from buildings to landscape, parking to existing buildings, plus the proposed developments happening. I won't zoom around in here, but the thing that's important to us about this is, as we look at these alternative futures, there's going to be distinctive components and variables that are going to, some are going to be radically different, some are going to be continuous threads as we look at each one of these futures here. So you'll see on the right-hand list there, it ranges from the street network, a block structure, to parking, to the town hall building site, adjacent neighborhoods and approaches to that, parks and greenways, open space and trails, stormwater strategies. So all these components and others as we get into this process, you're going to see different expressions of those within these alternative features. So again, as we look at alternative future 1, low intensity, we're going to go through a number of layers here for each one of these organizing principles: mobility, nature, gathering, living, civic, and soul. So with mobility, in the low intensity approach, we are looking at the street network as it sits right now and as it's planned based upon infrastructure improvements that are happening with the interstate in 21, as well as we're showing the streets that are planned based upon projects that have been recently approved. So what you see here, this is the network that's in place right now, not adding any additional streets. So if you look at it sort of quadrant by quadrant, in the northwest quadrant, you see that still remains sort of a super block organization right there. Very little access other than Sherwood and then Commercial Drive, as well as Main Street and Old Statesville Road. To the south, you begin to see a little bit more of a street network. You know, the improvements there with Holbrook and some of the street grid connections that are happening there. As we move to the southeast, you see what we're proposing here is, rather than moving forward on the regulation plan in terms of some of the street networks that were proposed there, would that necessarily throttle back and become more of a network of parks and trail systems in this scenario here? If We go to the northeast, we begin to look at that street grid connection that's already in place, plus the extension of the new projects that are emerging as recently approved. So what this gives us is sort of a picture of the street network as it exists now, plus things that are approved and underway now. What does that mean in terms of Gilead Road and what the future of access might be for the downtown? As we drove in this evening, every time we come, we see more and more activity there on Gilead Road as you come off the interstate. So you can see, again, we're showing that dash yellow line. What does that mean in terms of the street design, cross-section, right-of-way, as that extends to your downtown and through downtown on Huntersville Concord Road? That begins to inform us in terms of the type of activities that might be situated around that. The other thing you see here is we look at mobility relative to trails. We're showing the Seam Trail, which is an amazing opportunity to provide some additional connectivity from a pedestrian and bicyclist standpoint. We're also showing the downtown Greenway extension from the downtown park as it cuts through from Sherwood to Commercial. The other thing that should be mentioned about this in terms of on-street parking, which was a key organizing principle, we're still limited to the handful of spaces that are going to be part of the Main Street project. So in this scenario here, we're saying that there's no on-street parking for Gilead Road, Huntersville Concord Road, Main Street beyond those couple of spaces, or Old Statesville Road, just as a function of the fact that we're not introducing more street connectivity and allowing for some additional movement and level of service. You can also see here the red dots, and these will be consistent across the plans here. The red dots represent existing dead-end streets or connections that don't extend and connect to other areas. So again, we're looking at that in terms of the street grid connectivity as well as street grid density. As we look at nature, the approach here is to really embrace the existing greenways and enhance them as much as possible. So you can see, again, going from northwest, the opportunity to expand and really embrace the trail system as part of the downtown Greenway. On the southwest, you see, again, the opportunity to understand those existing greenways. The other thing I should mention about this, as we look at the opportunity for stormwater integration in this scenario here, we're really looking at individual stormwater solutions based upon individual projects, as we're seeing right now. So for instance, you see that pool of blue there, that's associated with the downtown, or the town center project. That's the stormwater facility for that project alone. I know with Vermilion Village, as we talked about before, stormwater is being handled there with underground vaults. So there's some considerations there as we look at what the opportunity for future development would be under this scenario where each project is responsible for controlling their stormwater individually. Just to talk a little bit about more of the greenway opportunities on the southeast side quadrant. There we saw, again, there's a lot of large tree canopies there, and to really embrace the potential trail network and allow for touch points along the Seam Trail, where, again, looking at mobility from bicyclists and pedestrians as well, have that opportunity to integrate with that greenway system. You also see a number of areas defined with the green dots and dashed lines. Those represent tree canopy areas that are embedded with existing development, primarily residential right now, but we're screening that saying that, okay, within these areas here, we want to be mindful of protecting specimen trees and development that occurs in these envelopes is doing its best to preserve the existing tree canopy. You see with the green dots, the bold dots, and again, I should mention, this is a work in progress here, and we'll be refining this as we get up to the public forum next week. But we have the existing parks identified as well as new parks that could be potential as we look at each one of these scenarios. So a couple of key ones here, and the strategy behind that is certainly along Huntersville, Concord-Huntersville Road. Is there an opportunity to extend some of the greenway that's established with Veterans Park? Is there an ability to create some linear parks that connect from these quadrants here to bring that greenway and connectivity through your downtown core. You see also here in this scenario, we're showing the vacant lot that was planned for the town hall being intentionally looked at as a park space. We're looking at park spaces to the north at the roundabout, as well as others that are looking at these touch points. In terms of gathering for the low-intensity approach, the notion here is that, again, thinking about the organizing principle, where's that core area where people are going to be focusing day-to-day walkability, activities, where's that core area? And this one is somewhat compact based upon some of the infrastructure that we know is possible as we're building up this layer here. So for this expression here, it's really focused on that block where the existing commercial activities taking place, extending along Gilead Road, embracing the front door to the downtown park, Holbrook Park, but it's holding itself from going across the tracks. That we see that as a barrier in this particular scenario here, where the fact that we can't improve some of those streets, particularly Huntersville Concord Road, that really begins to focus our gathering for this scenario. You also see the opportunities to think about the gateways north and south at those roundabouts, logical locations, but what are some of those gathering opportunities there? On the west side, with the resolution of the Gilead Road project, with the extension of Gilead Road, you see that as an opportunity to have a gathering. What does that gathering look like in this type of scenario where the street improvements might be minimal relative to pedestrian activity? We also know that on the east side that there's an opportunity for a unique sort of gathering or gateway space, given the really village project and some of the residential activities that are happening on the other side of the street. It's really more of a linear gateway or corridor as you come into Huntersville from the east. Living, again, with this, we're just trying to define living envelopes within the downtown area. Again, as we mentioned before, we've identified those existing projects that have been approved, and we understand the number of units that are going to be brought online there. But outside of that, where are some areas where residential might be likely to occur? So again, with this diagram, we're not necessarily saying one type of residential use or other. We're just trying to understand where those opportunities might be. In terms of civic, again, we look at the whole range of civic activities from Town Hall in this scenario here. Again, this would be perhaps the opportunity to pursue the notion of expanding this facility as the new Town Hall. And what does that begin to mean in terms of other civic activities that happen in and around downtown core? We look also including the churches, well-established churches as civic anchors within the project. And then the school is certainly an important civic component to thoughts here as well. And lastly, soul, and this is where we get into, where are those core soul elements that, gives life to Huntersville. And again, it's really the synthesis of a lot of these activities that are happening in that gathering area. And that's where, in this scenario here, we're looking at those focus points there. But that also extends to some other unique things that are happening in and around Huntersville. Of course, with the Hunter House and other activities that are happening around, that does give a soul to Huntersville. But what does that mean in terms of providing a cohesive experience, or is it more of a fragmented experience in terms of capturing that soul?
I'm going to talk about it this one. This is the last slide of one of the one thing about this, so you see what it means by low intensity. It means, you know what? It's going to be low intensity in terms of capital improvements of the city. You get low taxes, right? All those kinds of things. That's generally what it comes down to in discussions. So it says, you know what? We're going to do a minimum amount to our infrastructure. We recognize and understand then that we're now more at the mercy of NCDOT, because if they deal with regional traffic issues, Gilead is Gilead. That means, you know, limited opportunity to an on-street parking because, hey, we're gonna be, you know, this is what we're gonna be doing, right? This is it, it's a low intensity kind of deal. We're not gonna worry about connectivity. We're gonna make sure that, you know, any kind of traffic stays within this corridor. It means from a development, we're gonna be concentrating, you know, development in the center, you know, and it's going to be, you know, by the definition of low intensity, it's going to be on the Hamlet Village scale of things. It means it would be probably, you know, buildings that are 3 stories or less. And we haven't, you know, this is general stuff. We haven't put it, you know, pencil to paper or sitting here writing design guidelines, but when you think low intensity, you think low intensity in the total envelope of this. It means that you would probably have a streetscape down Gilead and other places where retaining old houses, reusing them as office buildings and restaurants would be encouraged, and perhaps over development, you know, a redevelopment of parcels. It means in many ways, as low intensity often implies, it means more status quo. Because it means the variety of things that you're going to consciously be encouraging to do, either through policy, either through public expenditure, or through the zoning codes that you adopt, they're going to be more in keeping with stasis as opposed to change. That's the sum total of what's embedded in these type of approaches. That make sense? Discussion?
So Jack, this is not possible in the current zoning, right? A lot of this stuff is not. Is that the way I see it? So we're gonna.
So when you say it's not possible, all these uses would be allowed. You could have residential.
You've got, sorry, okay. There are apartment buildings in there. And I don't know if, I think the way you got this drawn is this area is okay for this. It's not 100% this, it could be a mix of that. So it's, this area is right for that. So let's just say, right behind Town Hall, there's a commercial, there's like a mixed use thing, I guess, the red piece on the property we just bought, for instance. I mean, are we zoned good for that?
Yeah, and to be frank with you, to kind of follow up, I mean, so the zoning would allow commercial and residential, our town center zoning, that maps uptown. So what you see just above it in yellow, right?
Right.
It's residential, what could be commercial today? So
Right,
getting to
okay.
your question, the zoning today would allow this, but it also allow more intensity for commercial. So as through this process, whatever ultimately comes out, I will say it would be probably standard practice that we'd have to amend our ordinances, one way or the other, up, down, whatever, to meet that vision. So this,
Okay.
Did
Yeah,
that
that's
answer your question?
kind of where yeah, it does.
If I may add that has been our assumption, is that this is a planning exercise, a master planning exercise. Ordinance were put in place at one point in time. Ordinance can be, changed or eliminated, seen that recently, which means new ones can be done to achieve the future you want to achieve. That's been the attitude.
The point there, I guess, was we can't micro-manage it to a point where we know exactly what goes where. So
Exactly.
if we say, let's change the zoning here so this can be commercial, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what is private property. It could be anything within zoning. So it's, I guess, something we got to keep in mind when we're planning these things is it could be anything from something, less aggressive to something, full on.
Yeah, I guess that very low intensity is really just low change. Not a lot of change. It's kind of like this, most of this would have happened anyway.
Just organic growth kind of stuff, I would think. Yeah.
So to get, with this little block to the south here, again, as part of the recommendations we have is, is there a program for improvement, facade improvements, landscape improvements? So again, if some of the aspects of this low intensity model are appealing, there are certainly some mechanisms in place to make sure that that's achieved at its best level.
Oh, exactly. You have to be perceived, this is a strategy to be low in quality, far from it. People will make decisions on their property, you will have programs that you will want to do to adopt, to encourage appearance and all those kinds of things. I mean, that's embedded in the logic of this. But like Larry said, but it's almost more of a libertarian model, I suppose, like water quality. You're going to say, look, we have rules. This is your property. You're going to fix your water. Take care of it to the extent it says, as opposed to, no, we're going to work and do an infrastructure as a town, and we're going to look at water quality from a more infrastructure standpoint, and so we can achieve other benefits that might bring to us. It's a different attitude.
Yeah, just to be clear, you mentioned limited improvement and limited capital improvement. So does that mean in this model that perhaps there might not be the pedestrian amenities, wider sidewalks, lighting, those kinds of things, mobility for pedestrians, biking, included in that, or no?
No, in terms of things that increase quality of life, as in, like you say, sidewalks, paths, and walkways, as Larry said, no, that's embedded in it. It means we're not looking to make major automobile street improvements to connect streets, to create a grid that works, which might then give you that argument to deal more favorably with NCDOT, because you're moving cars instead of this dendritic way, where you collect them and come down streets. You're going to be working more from a network standpoint.
Gotcha.
That's the main thing.
Can you talk specifically about the property in front of the elementary school, that idea there? I mean, you've been talking to CMS, I guess, so tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, the notion
that.
is, and CMS has been doing this here on a number of their school properties, where they'll do a joint development scenario, where if they have a large area of land, they'll carve off a piece of the land that works for their school program, and then look at redeveloping a portion of that land that's not necessarily needed for their campus program. So in this scenario here, we know that there's future plans for that elementary school, and what they want to do is they want to keep the existing facility operational while they do in the new facility. So what logically would happen is, the school as it is now would stay operational. They would build a facility somewhere in this envelope, and then at some point they would demolish that building. And with this scenario here, is there an opportunity to capture that front piece for a new development that would have some frontage on Gilead Road? In this scenario here, we're looking at potentially some housing that might be appropriately scaled, that might provide housing for teachers, or it might be housing for workforce, or for anything else that might be happening. One of the great things that we see, the relationship to the Gilead Road mixed-use project, it could be an extension of that project, because we know townhomes that are proposed here. That could be something that gives you some more harmony along Gilead Road in that frontage continuation.
Related to his question about CMS, do you have an idea, if you've been talking with them, do you have an idea of time frame that they're looking at?
I have
No
not.
idea.
We have not heard in terms of timing.
I can partially answer it. I think there's speculation that they're looking at a 2023 bond referendum.
Oh, yeah.
As we all know, even with school bonds, even when they pass those bonds, they grade the stones. Some people get schools quicker than others. Some people are at the end of a bond cycle. So who can guess that?
Yeah, they build them where they don't need them. How about the Church Street, that multifamily unit up there on Huntersville Concord and Church, and yeah, there you go.
The White Oaks or something like that.
How does that one fit in?
We were showing that as an opportunity for either attached home or perhaps a multifamily development that would take advantage of proximity to the downtown core. Again, trying to be as sensitive as possible. And again, we're not saying that entire envelope would be all one project. There might be one or two projects, some that might be attached homes, or a smaller infill multifamily project. But we're just saying in terms of its relationship to the downtown core, its access and visibility, and then from an urban design standpoint, just to kind of give you some scale along that edge as a facade, if you will, along Church Street and the Seam Trail facing Veterans Park. There's some opportunities there in terms of, just from a market standpoint, that's beachfront property essentially.
Right.
So again, that's just an envelope for that sort of expression of a change of particular building typologies going from the existing sort of single-family homes into something that might be a little bit more
Okay.
different scale.
In this model, what happens with Old Main Street, the gray area right there at the center across from Town Hall? Is that, with electricity, are you saying it would just organically change as it would?
Right.
Yeah, all that, yeah, that's
Here?
it, yeah.
Again, that's, to your point, that, we see that being organic. I mean, we could set up some guidelines in terms of improvements that could happen there to perhaps make the parking function a bit more efficiently, some landscape treatments, improve accessibility to get to other shops that are around that block. And that's sort of the hatching there. So we see that as an opportunity for like an improvement program to really help a lot of the structures that are in place. And there's also an opportunity for a couple of infill. You see this 1 to 2 story building right here. There's a surface parking lot right now. So you could do like a really nice little infill project there too. So that's the approach for this block under this scenario here.
And to be clear, when we say this too, it means that if one wanted to go with a low-intensity approach, the assumption is, from our standpoint as planners, is that there would be a corresponding set of codes that would put limits on, individual development size, in terms of square footages, heights, uses, all those kinds of things. At some point in time, they would be attended to that. If you say you want this to be organic, I use the word status quo again, that it'd be a hamlet, a village of smaller buildings, then you would correspondingly write codes for that over the course of this. I mean, that's what the low intensity, it means that at every level. I think everything you think about, it means not taking the big move or allowing the bigger things that development might want to see.
During the recent festivals off of Church Street and up to the Norfolk Southern line, I noticed that there were 40 to 50 cars parked infill like that. Do we know what the right-of-way for Norfolk Southern is from Church Street to that? Is that all right-of-way for them? Just that?
My understanding is Norfolk Southern has a 100-foot right-of-way from the center line of track.
That's what they'll claim.
That's what they're claiming.
Okay.
But obviously that overlaps some of the streets.
Right.
And we see this condition, Terry and I are working on projects throughout the Carolinas where there's encroachments and,
Yeah.
you know,
Interesting.
Does this change Maxwell? I'm sorry. Does this change Maxwell at all?
that would be an opportunity for a focused improvement project if that's the case there. But again, it would not necessarily be a focused capital improvement program unless that was something that you wanted to be included as part of some of these other scenarios. Or it could be a focus item, a key item with this low-intensity model here that Maxwell needs to be improved from Wintersville Concord Road to Greenway.
So this is like a laissez-faire approach, just kind of leave it as a box.
Let me be clear. It's what it means when I say status quo, and I want people to understand, it doesn't mean, like I gave with that first slide about quality, it doesn't mean that as a town, you would not, even under this scenario, you would not enact codes and policies that would compel this place and compel property owners to develop it according to this small town view. I mean, your neighbor in Huntersville did that at many levels. In many ways, the mechanisms and tools that your sister town up the street started 30 years ago were done based upon similar kind of perceptions. So again, as we say, you know, it's an alternative future low density. You know, you would still be making decisions and acting as citizens, not completely laissez-faire, but you would be embracing a certain strata of what's possible, potential. The only difference I want to call out, and I would be remiss if I didn't say it one more time, is that, in my view, Davidson wasn't burdened with the same type of traffic dynamics that you happen to be with Gilead, nor that you will suffer more in the future as all that land to your east develops. That's my view and the traffic planner's view. That's a slight difference there.
How do you compel the property owners to make changes? Like if it, this, more organic homes.
It's called zoning ordinances. Yeah, I mean, with zoning ordinances in appearance, there's every municipality has these toolkits in their box. You may decide to have an historic district. I'm not advocating these things, I'm just laying them out for you. And when you get to historic districts, a property owner can't even pick his own paint color because people have done research and it's that. So there's a whole, toolbox full of tools that are available to municipalities. And I should say citizens, if they want to empower their municipalities to do these things.
Just, if I'm correct, then what you're saying when you compare Davidson and when you're talking about the traffic and stuff, you consider Davidson low intensity?
I would consider that in terms of what could have transpired in Davidson, had they not put certain rules in place, they would have easily been, at this juncture in time, probably 2 or 3 times more denser in their town center than they are now. So yes, on a relative scale, I would.
I do want to say that there are certain buildings in Davidson that are kind of intense. The Triangle Building, the Flatiron Building. Right across the street from that, right next to their town hall, is a 4-story building. It looks 3, but then you go back and it's a 3-story. So those were choices of, so the Davidson does allow that kind of taller building, but it's just individual choices that are made. I'm buying this property, I'm putting this here.
Exactly, I agree with you. And I would say that they could have had, the only point I was making, Jack, if they hadn't have had those kinds of debates and things, those 3-story buildings at some point in time, like right now, would probably be, 5, 6s, or 8s, given if they didn't have the kind of debates and discussions and then policies and plans and laws. Yeah.
You want to say something?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So all the East Church Street, all that, are you guys talking to people like Nate or other developers who own the majority of those parcels over there to see what their plans are, what they're planning to build there?
No,
Why not?
it's not part of our scope. We are doing visionary planning, and you are assembled to sit here with us and to evaluate the things we're bringing forward. That kind of information, I encourage each of you to bring that as an empowered person and member of this committee to the table and discuss it.
I can't help but every time we bring up Davidson and Huntersville, point out 107 feet from here is Highway 115. There is no on-street parking on Highway 115 from 485 till you get to Davidson. But Davidson has parking on both sides of the street. Dare anyone go take that parking away? And yet we were told, supposedly, that we can't have on-street parking on 115. That's why Discovery Place Kids and all that property and this building are built in the right of way. Davidson cannot be compared to Huntersville for 100 reasons. In my mind, the number 2 reason, number 1 is the school. Number 2 is on-street parking continues to be abated in this town. And oh my God, would I love to see the first person that walked up there and said, we're taking one space away.
Well,
We're talking about the same street.
yeah.
Same highway. Old timers, forgive me, I won't point them out,
Yeah.
will tell you that that's the old 21.
Yeah. No, I'm not arguing any of those points. But Charles, when I mentioned Davidson, I'm talking about at that high policy level, citizens had a view, citizens expressed their view, citizens compelled their elected officials and their staff to do certain things over the last 30 years. That's all I'm saying. I'm not disagreeing with anything you say.
In the grade that y'all were talking about,
Yeah.
for the festival, before any shops were open outside of Shaw's
Yeah,
that used this parking lot,
right.
there were 57 cars parked in that parking lot across the street to support the festival.
Yeah.
Because the town doesn't have enough parking
Yeah.
to support those festivals. And praise God, it was an enormously attended festival. But we don't have the parking for all of this.
Not 100% conditional.
Shall we do, yeah, great. Shall we do this? Because I want to run out of time. We have two other alternative futures. We can always come back to anything at the end, tend to, but can we move on to the next one?
So where on the agenda you?
We're still in the midst of it.
You're kind of flipping between 8 and 9.
We'll speed it up.
With alternative 2, we're looking at the medium intensity. And again, starting with the existing conditions, looking at those same distinct components and variables. With mobility, the first big move here with the medium is we're looking at embracing this east-west connector as part of the regulating plan, and also looking at that in a different standpoint from a street typology. The notion here is that can we create another connection east and west that parallels Gilead Road to relieve some of the pressure off of Gilead. So this alignment here looks at the opportunity to come off of Old Statesville Road and come across, and this is where we began to look at some of the topography, the existing conditions, and horseshoe around. We know there's a draw in this location here, and connect to Commerce, which would ultimately lead to the BRT station. The notion here, again, is to provide additional network on the north side of Gilead Road and allow for commuters who wish to use the BRT station to have access to that station without going through the downtown core. The other thing that opportunity, or the other thing that that street allows us to do is look for additional connections off of Gilead Road. So you see with the blue lines there, where we're connecting some of those red dots, we're extending some of these streets, we're providing more of a grid off of Gilead Road to allow for some connectivity on both sides of the street. To point out a few, we know that there's a driveway that's planned for the Gilead Road mixed use project. Is there an opportunity, if this road alignment is put in place, to treat that as a true street and have a street connection? With the school property, you know, is there an opportunity in discussions with CMS as they look at positioning their campus here to the north to extend Hillcrest and create a new square here, this location? Again, we're trying to look at opportunities to align cross streets to increase functionality and safety as long as we can along Gilead Road. Some of the other things, as we look at the downtown core, you begin to see we're introducing new streets to perhaps increase street grid density in the downtown, in the core, to allow for some more opportunities for some more public parks that are more formal in nature. You see on the south side, we're introducing perhaps some access drives or some smaller alleys, again, to allow for permeability of this block as we look at this in a medium intensity development scenario. We're looking also, you know, where are those opportunities to help provide connections that may or may not be desired by the community, but, you know, just logical in our minds to allow for more street grid connectivity, where you might have a dead-end street that is nearby another street if the conditions are correct to allow for more connectivity and circulation through the neighborhood. You'll also see here on the southeast side where we're really bringing back those streets that were defined in the regulating plan to, again, help with the street circulation through the downtown. The other thing you'll see with the red is by providing this link, there's an opportunity then, as we look at, traffic patterns that are emerging farther east, to perhaps divert and utilize this path versus coming through Huntersville Concord Road and into the downtown. So effectively, you're peeling off some traffic that would otherwise come through here. And as that begin to give the ability for DOT to understand a different cross-section for Gilead Road, where you see here in the dashed yellow lines, can we present a logical case for on-street parking? Maybe not up and down the entire street, but in certain locations to allow for that street to act in a more responsible way. Are there some things that we can look at with the Main Street project down the road? Simple things like perhaps eliminating turns or just, perhaps different cross-section activities that would allow for us to introduce or reintroduce some on-street parking in limited areas.
Larry, is that another representation of a circle? Is that Stumptown or is Stumptown further south? Where that circle is, that connection.
Yeah, this is Fourth. That's a great point, Bob. Each of these circles represents the current access points across the rail corridor. So those are, I don't want to call them the choke points, but those are the access points from a vehicular standpoint and a pedestrian standpoint from the east to west there.
So the top is Raymond Church Road?
Raymond Church is just off the page here. This is Fourth.
That's where the new roundabout is, right?
Yes.
Right.
So is there a speculation on what UPV would look like on these new roads? Like, I don't know if you guys calculate that or not.
Our engineers are looking at that right now.
Currently.
Yes.
They're doing that.
Yes, sir.
You can get rid of the red dot between.
With your empty buses going in and out there. No, they're not. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Janelle?
So, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused because I guess I'm moving a little bit ahead, but it looks like this road is all in like a nature park, like where the greenway is coming at.
It's in the woods.
So they're like, the neighborhood is like affected here a little. I'm turned around by how everybody's saying they're splitting a neighborhood in two, but it looks like it's going straight through.
It's not.
It's not,
Yeah. It's in the woods behind CMS.
Okay.
Well, CMS owns those woods.
They do.
They do.
So does it take that strange bend to accommodate for the water feature you've got there, or is it topography? Why was it
So you
shaped
see,
so oddly?
this is a tributary of Swan Creek. It comes to a point right about here. So that is a significant drop here. And we
Yes,
looked at
about 30
another
feet.
scenario that essentially followed the Greenway Phase 2. We didn't show it dashed in on this, but we know that to make that crossing, there would be, a bridge or a bottomless culvert of some sort. There'd be some challenges with fill and environmental considerations as well. But with this, we saw an opportunity to respect the existing grade as much as possible. And in doing so, and this is another layer to this medium intensity, can we look at a more regional approach to stormwater? Is there the opportunity to create a stormwater facility that might begin to capture this quadrant of your downtown? And again, you see, in various other locations, at the headwaters of these greenways and stream channels, is there an opportunity to do something that's very creative? Again, we haven't gotten to the level of design yet, but it's really just identifying those areas based upon topography and existing environmental conditions where those things might logically occur.
The other thing about that road too, you'll notice too, by taking this path, it would be a slow design speed road. And we've talked about this before. One of the greatest fallacies that of modern transportation engineers think you can design a straight road that's 4 lanes wide and post it at 25 miles per hour. They think that any human being is ever going to drive it at 25, unless other human beings are backed up on it.
But the other thing
Design speed roads, when you design them to a certain design speed based upon curvature, based upon widths of roads, and visual friction, yes, parking's always a good one. It happens, yes, ma'am.
So here's my concern. I'm looking at it from the perspective of people who are driving maybe to the BRT station, but also potentially people who don't have cars and are riding their bikes or walking to get there. And I'm really concerned about the location of this road because, one, it does go behind an elementary school. It interrupts, I think, the peace and tranquility. We talked about nature as being one of the pillars. And so people who are walking or riding their bike trying to get to the transit center, competing with the speed and people who are trying to get to work and get to the transit center quickly, it changes, I feel like, the safety of that area. I know that Angels and Sparrows properties there will have a ton of kids running around the area. It's not, in my mind, a safe location for people who are in a hurry to get to a bus transit center versus where you can accommodate maybe people who are disenfranchised being able to walk and or enjoy nature without worrying about traffic all around them. I mean, that's their life, right? In general, with all these roads and major roads, and they have to live right on the edge versus providing them with, hey, here's a tranquil way you can go to work and get to your transit center.
Interesting, good point. I think that's a good debatable point. I think an equally debatable point when you look at particularly towns and cities, that when you have a chance to put those kind of places in nature beside roads, that it's seen more as much as a benefit than as a negative. It depends upon the detail. I will grant you, there are no good examples in Huntersville, so I can't give you one, sadly.
But can you provide an example of what that road would look like?
Yes,
Just for
we can
visual,
do
because
that.
visual
Yes,
makes
yes,
an
I think
important
it's
statement,
important.
and
I
that's
think it's
Yeah,
important.
walk that greenway and envision that road.
You're not taking away the benefit of
Well, I can take you,
Sooner than we want it to be.
well, I can take you to probably one of the best roads anywhere. I can take you to the Queens Roads in Charlotte. And is even more, it's more intense than this one. And everybody is brother loves riding on those riding bikes.
John?
Seems to be about,
John?
Bob, you sounded perfect when you said that there's not an easy way. So you have to ask yourself, do we take that alternative route? You know, you can look at the road, again, you're talking about Queens Road. You can look at the route as being a beauty ride.
The organizing principles, there's this gathering for one person of 1,000 people, in your downtown.
You think about this, like Larry's showing, this is good, this is okay. That the point of this one would be, so many of these things, just like we go, like we said, we're going small, medium, large coming up, is that except for that core there where Larry is talking about, one could very easily say our attitude is for Gilead Road and everywhere else, okay, let's do what we're planning on doing under Alternative Future 1. Those will be the rules that take place there. That say, in other words, we're going to allow for gathering in the places where retail can gather in a more aggregate way. We're going to control that and put it in this pink area right here where Larry's talking about. Make these connections across the track is going to be there, but the other areas may very well would mimic some of the things we talked about.
Again, with living, we're showing those opportunities. Where are those living opportunities in that core area? And then outside of that, what is the approach? If we create this square here, it's a bit larger than what's there now with the CMS. Is there a larger living opportunity along Liberty Road? What are those opportunities in your gateways, north and south? And what are some of the approaches to take advantage of these greenways that become more formal as we get into the medium intensity? With Civic, again, we want to look at different opportunities for those, the town hall. In this scenario here, we're looking at town hall was planned. And what does that begin to mean in terms of other civic activities? Is there, with a more approach to this block here, the opportunity to look at a cultural arts building as a new facility that anchors Veterans Park? Again, what role do the churches play in terms of enhancing the civic activities that they're already doing now, but as part of this this medium intensity strategy here. And then the soul. I mean, again, what is that opportunity to capture that core area? Again, keeping with the existing structures that are now there and are important, but also allowing for new expressions to emerge that are sensitively done in a way to enhance this core gathering area. Now, we talked a lot about medium intensity on the front end. I don't know if you want to stop here and talk a bit more, or we can go into the high.
You have thoughts?
Go ahead.
Is there any flexibility with that triangular shaped building? I mean, I like it a lot, but it seems it's currently not used. The triangular shaped, the old library, it's now the cultural center. Are we gonna have to build around that, or is that a permanent feature of this town? Not that I'm in any hurry to tear it down, but it just seems underutilized.
It's a great question, and, as part of this, these plans, we're always highlighting those existing historic structures, so you understand as we look at these envelopes, where they are, and you can make decisions as to the level of importance, how we integrate that. So, yeah, we're not necessarily saying that it's just one building. It could be that, this composition includes that building as part of its redevelopment.
Is that a historic building?
No, it's not designated. There's levels of historic.
It is not designated.
No. Because Jack, I had talked to you about that a long time ago, about that cultural center. You said that there might be a opportunity to acquire that or move that at some given point.
I guess I'm getting older because I don't remember that, but, but I will, there are strings attached to that building.
Yeah, it's
Mecklenburg
county,
County.
right?
It's Mecklenburg County. And you won't be messing with that unless somebody lets go of those strings. Now, it was designed by an architect of some note. So it is a sensitive building, and the ownership is not, we don't have it under control. So it is something unless something changes, it's something we'll have to design around.
It's not designated, but it is on the landmarks of note list.
There was a survey done, and that was included, as you mentioned, building of note, and there's others that merit attention. So again, we wanted to identify those buildings within your downtown. So as we talk about these things, we can make those decisions, how best to sensitively integrate them or move them or.
So that was a design not fitting this area that somebody won an award, and now we're stuck with it. Is that an interpretation? That's my interpretation of it.
Well, there's a mixed use in on top of it right now, so there you go.
Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, I didn't design it, so that hurt my feelings. That's okay.
You're not old enough.
Please tell me you didn't design work on that.
It is a pain.
So in alternative 3, high intensity mobility, one of the big changes you see is in that east-west connector here. You can see in this scenario here, whereas before we're taking a track that was a bit higher north, we've pulled that roundabout down. What we're trying to do here is create primacy in this scenario here for this road and allow for the CMS property to sort of self-contain on the north side of that street. So while the other one had CMS below the street, the south of the street, here CMS is to the north of the street. So we're bending that as quickly as we can, as close as we can to Gilead Road, and coming back up to make this connection. And what that allows us to do, again, is to look at introducing, street connectivity between that street and Gilead Road. The other thing you'll note, the roundabout here, again, that's an attempt to give that road primacy and allow for an opportunity perhaps to say, well, Sherwood Drive starts at that roundabout. This is the entrance into the neighborhood here. And there's consideration, perhaps that leg of Sherwood goes away or becomes treated a bit differently. To allow for some other opportunities here with greenways and open space.
One thing it says, you can see it clearly though, what it does, because everybody's been to a school, school does have a lot of traffic. It's got bus traffic, it's got teacher, parents, and it's got, pick up and drop off. So it allows for them to have at least, 2 sides of a school, which is their public face, but then on the backside is a school within a park. So everything else they talked about in terms of water, everything else that allows that.
If I can make one recommendation, I see where this is going with, now it crosses over the railroad railroad track, a more intense grid, I can count at least six people in this room that live within spitting distance of this road that's being proposed. I think it would be worth considering taking this route of the road where it's south of the school and incorporating that into the level 2 alternative future, because that could be a potential compromise. Again, I can't speak for the people in this room, but if their concern is having all that traffic closer to that neighborhood, maybe the school that's gonna get built there anyway becomes the buffer. So just something to consider, because this is the higher density option.
Yeah.
Something to potentially meld the two together.
Yeah, and that's why I showed Mr. Potato here. We can pull one and others, and if they work together, we gotta.
And you see that red line in terms of that link, you know, if this link does become possible, it is possible to think long-term that a crossing could be possible. Does this become now that sort of alternative route versus here at Glendale, perhaps it's here in a second?
I thought this Stumptown Road extension is supposed to take care of some of this traffic.
Absolutely will.
Yeah.
Well, then this isn't necessary.
Yes, it is.
Beg to differ. Needed.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
this area, yes.
So you're gonna add one?
Trade one.
You go with Norfolk Southern in this town.
I was gonna say, I thought we were already gonna have to close one or two to four, okay, yeah, four.
Yes.
So you think they're gonna let you add one back?
Well, again, it's going to be a matter of negotiating the number of closures and other driveway locations down the corridor. Again, we're thinking,
Look at it.
Well, wait, hey, you know what? Point is, like I said, all these things are connected. You know, and it's like if you can't, you know, this is
And the other-
the art
yeah.
of possible.
right. The other thing we haven't talked too much about is phasing. And we're not saying this all happens
At one time.
at one time.
And all the blue lines are new roads.
Correct.
So you're gonna split a block in a quarter there in the curve at Huntersville Concord?
Here?
No, over, right there. You're gonna split that block in a quarter?
Yeah, so we'll talk about that as we get into some of the layers. And again,
So if the transit train is not gonna run on the tracks,
It's not?
and few people, but since the train's not gonna run on the tracks for transportation, just freight, then why can't we open up all those roads that we've already closed? And then that would improve where people would have alternatives to go from the west of the railroad to the east of the railroad.
the
That
other
would be a
thing, in
change.
terms of mobility, again, we're thinking long-term, we haven't talked about it, you know, the future commuter rail, if that becomes a reality. I'm not saying, you know, 10 years, 15 years, it's 15 years, 20, 50 years down the road. What does mobility mean if you have a commuter rail station here? And the ability to have more street connectivity. So that's another layer that we're thinking, again, long-term. I'm not saying this all happens in one shot. It's something that could unfold and be part of your transportation plan over the next 50 years. Again, you can see more of the blue. We're looking at opportunities to enhance that grid in and around the post office. I'm sure you all know that there's some access driveways that circulate around there. Is there a way to creatively talk about turning one or two of those streets or those drives into streets to increase mobility and access in this area here? Again, we're still looking at opportunities inside downtown, outside of downtown. We know that traffic is going to build in any of these scenarios. What are some of those improvements that can be done to help?
Where's the clicker? The top. So one thing about it, let's, you know, because I don't want people to fixate on, say, this, and say, okay, well, there's the fly in the Chardonnay, so you gotta throw out the whole glass. The point is, again, these things are time dependent, and even given, remember all the things we said here, you got a crossing here. People may very well come into this and come down again to here. That's an intersection. That even may be around about there. It allows people these alternatives, so that if without this link right here, you're not going to be able, I don't think, to have a reasonable argument to NCDOT to do anything of the type of things that everyone wanted and said they wanted to see along Gilead that's embedded in those organizing principles. It's a little reality check. And I think the whole thing about, and I would extend it for this stretch right here, I I'd even, extend it here. At some point, as a part of policy, this maybe it's an alternative future thing, is you take back that out of NCDOT's hands.
Yes.
You take it back. We did it in South Boulevard and Charlotte, put on-street parking on it.
Have to do it.
That may have been, what I don't know, Davidson may have it that way too. I don't know what their politics are, haven't looked into it. But I mean, those are the kinds of things. But now, you have a reasonable kind of grid. With this one, you have a reasonable kind of gridded structure that can accommodate traffic in a way that will make sense for the future. We're sitting here making 50-year decisions. And with all due respect, Thomas Jefferson says you shouldn't indebt future generation, with debts today. We're talking about planning.
That's the difference.
Future generations need the benefit of looking at these things now, so you don't burden them with bad decisions in the future.
The other thing that's being shown in this scenario here is that Main Street in Old Statesville becomes a one-way pair. And what does that begin to do in terms of offering more on-street parking opportunities? And again, we're showing that across the entire length. It might be something that's phased over a couple of blocks, and then extend north and south. That's something that, again, perhaps happens in a 20-year horizon or something down the road.
I believe y'all mentioned that about 3 meetings ago, and we were told, I don't think I'm quite that old, we were told in this meeting, in this room, that at that point, it wasn't too late for the Main Street project to be one way each way and add some on-street parking back in.
No.
That was,
Yes.
I'm not
Told the
wrong.
opposite.
They asked that question.
Yeah.
You get the email on the questions?
Yeah, there's not a way to change the
There's a
two-way
way to
traffic.
do anything, Jack, it just takes money and politics.
Well, they would stop.
The project would stop, and that's going to be,
Maybe it should.
well, that is nothing that is going to happen with the current board that I'm aware of and the current management that I'm aware of. Nobody would argue for on-street parking stronger than Charles Gignard, Jack, Sean, and I'm a huge advocate of it. But I will tell you, I worry about one-way pairs because they have their own issues. So it's not the silver bullet. You just have to do it with great forethought. So this is a more longer-term scenario, like I said, about maybe 20 years or so. But it is part of their job to envision what could happen. And while I might have reservations about it, it is a viable and appropriate discussion to have. So.
Charles, I would just say I'm in favor of on-street parking, but by design, that Main Street project, you know this, because 2 years ago, or was it 3, the 34-space parking lot next to the Mexican tienda, and count the spaces of on-street parking that are there now, 34 plus or minus, but they built that little extra parking strip right next to the Mexican tienda. They already knew that on-street parking was not going to be available or viable there. Or planned it.
But they didn't replace enough, including what was north of Huntersville Concord.
Granted, but I'm just saying, they took that on-street parking and slapped that pavement down in between the Mexican tienda and the end of the street there.
How well I know and how well Sean
And
knows and 10 other people in this room.
So is the extra road, is that our price to pay for on-street parking on Gilead? And did we stipulate on-street parking on Gilead in our core principles founding?
Not specifically on Gilead, it was more, on-street parking is paramount.
Okay.
What I'm
Okay.
saying is, on any of these streets, you gotta have a working grid in order to essentially get the kind of streets that we did talk about, where there'd be multiple modality, streets where the car is a guest, good streets, like Jessica's already talked about, streets where if you want to walk, you don't feel like you're being run over by cars. All those things together, that relates to Gilead just as much as it does to Old Statesville.
So you're looking for a tight grid of street every eighth of a mile, block,
Best we can.
even though
Best
that's
we can, so people get
CMS property.
alternatives.
Okay.
What's the distance between those, where the school, where those two roads are, where Gilead and the new proposed road, what would be that distance?
You're looking at
300 feet.
500?
So can you put anything from a structural point of view? You could put some structures, commercial or whatever.
Sure.
There's already some land. That's the
That'll be,
Brian Hines development.
I think right there.
It's sitting there.
And with that road.
That's Sarah's house.
I can't,
Can you get your head around that?
this road, I mean, there's the opportunity with the on-street parking, the landscaping.
So that's Commerce Drive with that,
where that red dot is.
no, that black
Yes.
road going north, right there, and then into the traffic circle. That's Commerce right there. So those two belong.
Where's Commerce? Show me.
Sorry?
Show me Commerce.
Point at Commerce Drive, we're trying to find, or point at Sarah's property, down right in there, yeah, right there.
What's the road next? It's
So that would just give me more
Road frontage.
billable lot, road frontage, right?
Yeah,
Good.
watch traffic. Got your back.
I'm trying to isolate it. We can circle you now.
Jessica? Yep.
So what I do like about this version is that it is south of the school, so that I do like that the school and the kids would be a little bit more protected. Is there a way then, and I think Bob mentioned this, to ensure that whether it's a Woolnorf or however you, whatever you would do to that road to make sure that it's still slow, because it is going by other people's homes, and then another residential area that's planned. You don't want to suddenly make that seem like it's in the middle of this city versus.
Half the problem might be we drew that road with all these blinking red lines and stuff. People indicate 4 lanes, or no, it's not. It's not unlike many of the other roads.
A graphic to
2-lane
highlight,
road.
yeah.
Yeah, we kind of, but one thing I will say too, that this is the preferred, at this point in time, could change any day, this is the preferred for CMS, by CMS too.
But this is also contingent on future elections in 2023, passing a bond referendum, and from that bond referendum, if it did pass, designating money towards the north part of Mecklenburg County to build a school here. There's a lot of variables that are still in the mix.
Yeah,
So
it may
that
not
would
be
be the
this
best
bond, but it may be
alternative,
the
but-
next. Again, I deal in the 4th dimension of time. So, yeah, it may be the next bond.
Bond referendum next year for our roads on our current CIP, and we got enough on there without adding more to be taken away from the current ones that keep getting pushed back.
Yeah, it won't make this
That
one.
needs to be taken care of now.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned is that now that the connection behind the Aldi has been made, there is now a east-west connector from behind there along Holbrook Road. Now, it doesn't go all the way to 115, but it is another part of that grid that has, to my knowledge, there's not been any uproar over, and it is through a residential neighborhood. Whereas this is undeveloped land separated from a neighborhood.
Nobody really knows. I've used that.
And it's a nice
that
road.
It's nice,
It is
but
sidewalk,
I don't
it's
think
treed.
Nobody's on it.
Yeah,
I'm on it.
to-
Take it all the time.
People are gonna start finding their way back here.
That's you just put a greenway at the end before Hillcrest.
I'm sorry?
Slide the greenway, and then you could be out.
The Werner, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
We can do that in the low density one too. We just gotta all kumbaya on.
Well, actually, they are going to put 2221, they'll connect it. Yeah, they'll bring it down.
And then here, in terms of gathering, we're expanding that area. Again, we're not saying that this is, an intense development in this whole area. It's just how we understand gathering within your core. So we're looking at, other typical small towns when they have events and festivities and daily activities. Where are those walking activities usually concentrated? It's usually about a quarter mile from their center. And that's what this envelope begins to do, is it looks at gathering in a more broad, capturing way that encompasses some of these greenways. Also extends down Gilded Road, with the assumption being that you could begin to introduce more streetscape and on-street parking. So, in terms of gathering experience, it's a more, it's a larger area of influence, area that you perhaps want to study.
It could be like East Boulevard.
In terms of living, again, we're looking at those key areas within the gathering area.
Where are all these people that are living here gonna shop? Because you're sending all the traffic to 77. Where do we see some commercial investment in downtown?
Next slide.
Next slide.
Thank you.
So yeah, with Civic on this one, we're looking at an opportunity. That's it.
I said be the next one after this. That's Civic.
Sorry.
It's all about shopping. I don't know. It's all about shopping.
And again, we're trying to show different considerations for Town Hall. And this one here, we're showing as an anchor to Veterans Park. Again, allowing this east-west park experience, taking advantage of potentially a future one-way road system. You know, can you have a freestanding performing arts building or cultural arts building as an anchor on that park? And again, we're not saying that, you know, these are all retail buildings in these areas, but in terms of the frontage and the commercial activity, we're saying that this is the opportunity to really energize and embrace this new park near downtown.
And that's just, yeah, I kind of missed over that. You guys might have missed over. See, this street grid, the reason you had that tight street grid, what you see, we're creating an urban park right in the middle. So it's the ultimate expression of the gathering, right here. Urban park, it's about, what, 150 feet, Larry? The green, something like that. It allows for a festival. It's linked to the veterans. It would require probably some modifications at the edges here, but I will tell you, because we've heard this group mention it, and I think there's probably, I think there would be a lot of uptake from it. You know, the idea, well, why can't we engage in public-private partnerships? As I mentioned, I have other people come. This one, I will say, this has a kind of, right here, Charles gets to make a bunch of money. See, Sarah, we got a road for you. Charles, you can make a bunch of money on your land. This is the kind of place that has enough gravity just in that to attract somebody who could come in and say, I'll place a bet with my private capital with the town. You need more parking? Yeah, we're going to build it for me and everybody else as a part of a public-private partnership. You need new civic facilities, be it, you know, City Hall, Town Hall, be it other things. Yeah, all that comes together within a building, a complex, you know, town center, like in that 4-block thing. That is a model that the development community understands. See, the development, interesting, see, like I said when I started this thing, not about quality. You can have a great quality town at any of those scales. If I get a small latte, I enjoy it just as much as I get that big old tall thing, because it's a quality matter. But I will tell you, there are different steps in terms of the commercial development world that they will take on. Even though, as I said before, Nantucket is owned by, believe it or not, one financial entity, one developer, okay? And it looks, in that buildings where they used to drag whales in and out of it or something, whatever they did up there. But they inherited that and put it all together, and they manage it like a big, like Burkdale, for lack of a better, they manage it like that, they lease it like that, all those things. The private commercial development world, with maybe a handful of exceptions that do not build things like that. This they understand, because they understand the relationships they have with towns and cities to do these kinds of things. Doesn't mean you don't direct the quality as a town because you're doing a public-private partnership. Oh, yes, you do. You can direct that quality. It's up to you to how good you want this to be in that relationship, okay? But I'm just saying, this is why we felt compelled to show you the road systems, showing them working on a small, medium, large. That's why the green space, oddly enough, the green space is kind of, it's pretty, you notice, it's pretty high quality and similar no matter through here. Why is that? That's because you made the right decisions a long time ago as a town to have what you have there now. So we're just building on that. Everybody's going to be improving upon that incrementally. High quality, but incrementally in different ways, right? But the road system is something that was very important to this thing in terms of making a decision where you go with the futures, go with the future of this. And the attitude, you know, like I said, the attitude about character, radically different, high quality, the soul, we talked about the soul. It'll be different. But in each one of these have different development models and approaches to them. And obviously, this is why this planning thing is so important, because they will relate tremendously to the type of policies that flow out of this, and then the type of laws that are enacted to see its fulfillment.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
stay here later if you guys move on, we'll be here after.
Can you guys do some overlay? It's just hard to visualize the color grid on the actual, like, could you do like a satellite overlay of these maps? Or do you have them?
Do that? Yeah.
Yeah, that would be,
Yeah, we can
that
go
would
satellite.
be easier to visualize, I think, for
Yeah, instead of the
everybody.
map, we can insert a satellite over.
But you're gonna have some big
Yeah.
physical diagrams
Exactly.
next week, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And it's hard to see, I understand on screen right now, but you see ghosted behind there is the existing plan. That's the challenge we have graphically to kind of show some of these concepts and still have the
Yeah, it doesn't
background.
print so well when you do the ghosting though. And the crosshatches get lost too.
Thank you a lot, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Dave, next step.
Well, I don't think anybody needs a reminder, but May 12th, next Thursday, is going to be public forum number 2. I think that there was a lot of concern trying to do public forum number 1 digitally. We talked for a long time about how to get public input, and from a staff perspective, we really believe that having this face-to-face at the church is really, really important, and we're going to try to do our best to get turnout. I think you lose something in translation when you just try to post things up in town hall. I mean, we'll do it, and I think we need to make an offer to meet with anybody who would like to give input. Well, I think the most meaningful input we'll get will be at the church. We have ongoing work with CMS. When any of that information is available, we'll share it. We also have ongoing work with Gannett Fleming as part of the consultant team. When that traffic analysis is done, it should be done sometime this month, I believe. That will be shared with the committee. And you should also have gotten a copy of at least some responses we tried to make to questions that we've received over the last couple of meetings. We didn't put it on agenda. If you want it on an agenda, please let the chair or vice chair know, and we can figure out what we'll do with it. So the one thing I will tell you is, that's kind of heartening, is it seems like there are a lot of questions about implementation. And the one thing that we really stuck to in terms of the scope for Shook Kelly is we want an implementation strategy. If we all don't take it seriously, then we shouldn't be doing this in the first place. So that's kind of what we're trying to work toward, and you will see after the May 12th public forum, we will still come back and talk about the alternative futures one more time. So there's another discussion about that. Other than that, that's it, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So you, Dave did talk about they answered the questions, the staff, Dave and the staff, planning staff in town. So please review if you have any questions, how about sending Dave a question, a comment about them, so that he can group them together, and if need be, we can discuss them as a group or go over them as a group. Is that all right? Then is there a motion we adjourn? And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Thank you.
Thank you.